We are going to continue right along in Matthew chapter 5, studying our Sermon on the Mount. We, of course, have been looking at the Sermon on the Mount for a while. It begins and opens up with the Beatitudes, which we spent several weeks talking about those. Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are they that mourn, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst after righteousness, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the pure in heart, blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are they which are persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Sister Bobby, would you mind closing that door, please?
Exhausted. He had not been home very long.
We go on and we talked about, in the middle section here, some other things that he talked about, but we really identified the key for a great portion of the Sermon on the Mount is identified in verse 20. Verse 20 of chapter 5 says this, I say unto you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will in no way, in no case, enter into the kingdom of heaven. And I have talked about this verse kind of as being the key to unlock our understanding of much of what comes after and much of what we've been studying. And so since that verse, Jesus goes on and he's going to list several different areas, several different commands that are found in the Old Testament in the law. And he's going to contrast the tradition of the elders, the oral tradition that had kind of built up, the explanation of what those things mean. And he's going to say, you have heard that it was said, but I say unto you. And then he's going to offer his own explanation. And we've seen that already with murder. He said, you have heard that it was said by them of old, you shall not kill. But I say to you that whoever is angry with his brother without a cause is in danger of the judgment. We saw it with adultery, where he said, you have heard that it was said in time of old, in verse 27, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that whoever looks on a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery in his heart. We saw it with divorce. He said in verse 31, it has been said, whoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that whoever puts away his wife, saving for the case of fornication, causes her to commit adultery. And he does the same. And last week, what we looked at was found in verse 33. He said, again, you have heard it said by them of old, you shall not forswear yourself, but you shall perform to the Lord the oaths that you make. And so far we have seen, how many is that? That's 4 different areas where Jesus is citing an Old Testament command. He's citing the traditions around that command, and he's clarifying God's intent. He's saying, this is what those of old say, but this is what I say. This is the true meaning. This is, God himself interpreting his own law, his own commands, right? So Jesus he's not setting aside the law. He's not saying that there is an issue with the law. The issue that Jesus is dealing with is the traditions that have surrounded the law. He's dealing with the attitudes of the people, the way that the people were understanding these commandments. And we're going to go on today. We're going to continue this with the second to last command, which is going to begin for us in verse 38. So if somebody will please read verses 38 through 42.
I can't read tonight. I don't have any class.
That's all right.
I couldn't see.
You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You can keep going.
To 42.
Oh, okay, 40. But I tell you not to resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away.
Okay, and so this is our passage today. This is the next one that Jesus has citing. He's citing from the Old Testament law. Our goal here tonight is going to be to look at this idea of eye for eye. What is that? Where does that come from? What is the intention of that? We're going to look at the Old Testament verses that are relevant to it, the ones that Jesus had in mind while he was giving this teaching, no doubt. And then we want to look at Jesus' explanation. So again, we see that same pattern. You have heard that it was said, but I say unto you. So that's that same pattern. We're going to look at what God says in his Old Testament law. We're going to look at what Jesus says as he explains it. And then we're going to seek to make some applications. So that is our goal for this evening as we get going into this. So let's just go ahead and get into it. We heard this idea, and he says it here at the beginning of verse 38. You have heard that it has been said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Now, this idea, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, there is a phrase you may have heard. It's called lex talionis, which is a Latin phrase. It means the law of retribution. Lex means law, talionis, retribution. The idea of eye for eye, tooth for tooth has been known as lex talionis, or this for that, or tit for tat, or quid pro quo. There's all kinds of different names that are applied to it, but that is the general legal principle that is being presented here, that Jesus is talking about and that we find in the Old Testament. This wasn't, the Old Testament is not the only place where we see this concept of eye for eye, tooth for tooth. In fact, the earliest we know of this concept of eye for eye, tooth for tooth that exists is actually found in what is called the Code of Hammurabi. Has anybody ever heard of the Code of Hammurabi before? Hammurabi was a Babylonian king. He was part of the early Babylonian Empire, the first Babylonian dynasty. He's one of the great kings of Babylon. His name is Hammurabi. And we know about him because some of the writings, there are several artifacts of archaeology that exist that point back to his time. So he's one of the most famous ancient Babylonian kings we know of, in no small part because this law code of Hammurabi has been preserved and it exists and we can look at it today. And part of what we see in the Code of Hammurabi is this idea of eye for eye. In fact, it is stated very explicitly in this Hammurabi Code. And it's estimated that that Hammurabi as a king lived around 1750 BC. So that was a long time ago, right? 1750 BC. And just to give you a comparison, it's estimated that Moses lived around 1450 BC. So the Code of Hammurabi is about 300 years prior to Moses, 300 years prior to the Exodus and all of the stuff that we read about there. So this idea of eye for eye predates the Old Testament scriptures, just as far as history goes, but we also do see it. The main two places we see it are what I mentioned, the Code of Hammurabi, and in the Law of Moses. So are there any questions about this idea of lex talionis, the eye for eye, kind of where it comes from? Yeah, the best thing to do would just be to pull the wires out to get that to stop. It's one of those things, like, I don't even hear it anymore because it's just...
I don't pay attention to it either.
But, so at any rate, yeah, that's what we're talking about. This idea of eye for eye, it exists, like I say, outside of the Bible and inside of the Bible. Those are really the two sources where we see that language, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And the point, I'll just say, the point of this, because you've heard probably the quote that's attributed to Gandhi that says, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, right? And sure, but the idea of this eye for eye, this lex talionis, it was actually intended to restrict. It was intended to hold back evil men. It was intended to prevent blood feuds from happening. So we live in the South, so we're all familiar with the story of the Hatfields and the McCoys, right? And if you're not familiar with that, I mean, we all live next to Shreveport, and we know that there's inter-city wars that happen in the middle of every city in America. So, and the same thing is happening there. These are called blood feuds. And this was very common in the ancient world, especially amongst tribal peoples. You know, you might have one person from one tribe who kills somebody in your tribe. And so that tribe responds by killing 5 people from that tribe. And then they respond by killing all of the children in this tribe. And so they respond by killing all of the men in their tribe. And it's just this cycle of violence, this cycle of retribution, this cycle of vengeance. And the idea of eye for eye is to stop that dead. It's to stop that. It's to prevent things from devolving. It's to prevent people from exacting disproportionate punishment, if you will. So, you know, instead of I kill one person from your tribe, instead of killing 5 from theirs, the rule would be like life for life. You killed one, we kill one, right? Or if you get in a fight with somebody and they knock your eye out, the issue would be, okay, well, just because he blinded you in an eye, you don't get to kill him, right? You can blind his eye. Or if somebody breaks their hand in a working accident and it's my fault, well, they can't come and now put me to death because I broke somebody's hand. I would lose my hand. So the idea of eye for eye was an evolution. It was actually quite compassionate, quite humane. As far as legal systems and justice system goes, the point of eye for eye is to ensure that there are proper reciprocal punishments so that a punishment is not more than the situation calls for. Does that make sense?
The punishment should equal the offense.
Exactly. And so sometimes people think, there's some places where a thief steals something, and what do? They cut their hand off, right? And people oftentimes think that falls under the category of eye for eye, but that's not true. That's the kind of thing that eye for eye is trying to get rid of. And in the Old Testament scriptures, in God's law, when somebody steals something, we don't see that they're getting their hand cut off. We see that they have to pay back what they stole plus interest, which is a more just system. And that this idea of eye for eye, tooth for tooth was created really in no small part to prevent those over-the-top punishments, to prevent blood feuds, to prevent those death spirals that we see happen all the time, even in our own society. Any questions about the idea of lex talionis or the law of retribution?
That's the same thing that, I do to you what you done to me, right? It wasn't the same.
Very similar, yeah. Yeah. And we're going to get into that, and that's kind of the idea. So the idea there is this for that, or tit for tat. You do this to me, I do that to you. And that's kind of the standard there. That's the spirit of that idea of eye for eye. Let's look at some of these Old Testament passages. Will somebody... I'm going to assign a few here. So I'll take one. I'll take the first one, Exodus 21. Will somebody take Leviticus 24? And then somebody else take Deuteronomy 19. So I'm going to take Exodus 21.
I'll take Leviticus 24.
Sister Bobby will take Leviticus 24.
I'll take the Deuteronomy.
And Sister Dolores is going to take Deuteronomy 19. Okay, I'm going to read from Exodus 21. I'm going to read verses 23 through 25. Well, I'm actually going to start back in verse 22. It says, "If two men are striving and they hurt a woman who is with child, so that her fruit departs from her, and yet no mischief follows, she will be surely punished, according as the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he will pay as the judges determine." Okay, that's very important. I'm going to read this again in verse 22. "If two men are fighting, and a woman who is with a child gets hurt, so that her fruit departs from her, yet no mischief follows, he will be punished. The man who hit the woman, who injured the woman, he will be punished according as the husband's will lays upon him. And he shall pay as the judges determine." Take special note of that. Verse 23. "And if any mischief follows, you will give life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burning for burning, wound for wound, stripe for stripe." So that's the idea as it's presented here. There's our first reference we have to this idea of, you have heard that it was said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Notice in verse 22 that the man who does this will pay as the judges determine. Will somebody please read their passage from Leviticus 24, 19 through 30. It's a little bit, that might be 19 through 20. I may have accidentally typoed.
Yeah, I've got Leviticus 24, 19. "If a man causes the disfigurement of his neighbor, as he has done, so shall it be done to him. Fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, as he has caused disfigurement of a man, so shall it be done to him. And whoever kills an animal shall restore it, but whoever kills a man shall be put to death. You shall have the same law for the stranger and for one from your own country. For I am the Lord your God.
Very good. That's good right there. So again, we see this teaching where he says, if a man will cause a blemish in a neighbor, it shall be done to him. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever he has done, the same thing will be done to him. If he killed a beast, he'll repay the beast. Same thing. It's that idea of tit for tat. Now, will somebody read Deuteronomy 19:21? I guess I'll read that one because Sister Kathy said she is unable.
I said I'd do it.
That's no problem. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to read Deuteronomy 19, verse 21.
The Lord had it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay,
I apologize. I forgot that.
that's all right.
I'm distracted by all this commotion going on.
Show no pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, and foot for foot.
Very good. And so we see the same thing here once again. Show no pity, he says, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, and hand for hand, foot for foot. Okay, so those are our three passages. Those are the three times where we see this idea of eye for eye, tooth for tooth come up. And notice, especially in the first one that we read, that it was in the context of the law courts. None of these are given in the context of personal vendetta. None of these are given in the context of two individuals getting even with one another. One of the passages we read was in the context of the cities of refuge, where a person who accidentally killed somebody could flee, and then the judges would hear the case, and then they would render the punishment. And if he's found guilty, it's eye for eye, tooth for tooth, life for life, etc. The first one we read again mentioned the case where two men strive. If the judges determine such a thing, it will be eye for eye, tooth for tooth, etc. So this is always quoted. This idea of the law of retribution is always given in the context of the legal system. This is a legal principle. It's never given as this is how you settle personal disputes. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. No, that's not the context of these passages. The whole thing of retribution is to be carried out with judges and witnesses. There's a whole legal process that surrounds it. My point here in saying this is not a personal command. This is a legal command. This is a civil law that we find. And it's not meant to be applied amongst individuals, as we will see. Are there any questions about what we've read, about this idea of the law of retribution, about any of these passages we've seen so far?
Okay, so if somebody disfigured you, and it was automatically you disfigured them whether you wanted to or not?
Well, there was a whole legal system, right? So there was a legal system that would go in, and you would, and it would be determined by the judges what the punishment would be. And from very early on, the whole idea of eye for eye, tooth for tooth, all that stuff. Maybe in the beginning that was taken quite literally, but amongst the Jews in particular, it didn't take very long for them to begin to quantify those things. So it wasn't, you blinded me, now I'm going to take your eye out. It was, you blinded me, now you owe me for the loss of my eye. Like, you have to pay me. Or there's even one instance in here where if you kill a man's beast, you have to replace the beast. Like, there was a material compensation. That system of material compensation came to exist pretty early on amongst the Jews. And the way that it's understood and applied even to this very day amongst the Jews is that you're not going to find anyone out there hooking people's eyes out or anything. There is a monetary compensation. If a man's right arm gets crushed, you would have to compensate him more than if his left arm gets crushed because his right hand is his strong hand. You understand? So does that answer your question? But it would be a judgment that came down from a judge. It's because it's a legal thing. It's not like, you cut me, now I'm going to cut you. That's not at all. In fact, I think it's in Leviticus 19, we read the command from God, which is very clear. You shall not take vengeance into your own hands. There's a very clear command in the Old Testament. You are not to vindicate yourself. You are not to take vengeance. There is no vigilante justice in God's law. There is a legal system that is set up where judges make those kind of determinations. Any other questions or comments?
Well, that kind of goes into about the next, let's see, it's Matthew 5:39. If an evil person slaps you, you don't get him back. You don't retaliate.
Right. Good. So yeah, let's just go ahead and.
Kind of goes right into that in my mind.
Right. Well, that's where it goes in Jesus' mind too. So let's get into that. In verse 39, he says, "But I say to you, do not resist evil." And some of your translations may say, "Do not resist an evil person." And so we have to. So this is Jesus' command. You have heard that it was said, "Eye for eye, tooth for tooth." But I say to you, do not resist evil. Do not resist the evil person. And we have to ask the question, like, what does that mean? What does that mean, Jesus? Do not resist the evil person. Do not resist evil. What do you mean, do not resist evil? And I think in order to understand what he's saying, we just have to keep moving forward. We're not going to know what he means yet, but he's going to explain what he means. And as our sister already pointed out, here's the first example he gives. Do not resist evil, but whoever will smite you or slap you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek as well. And I want to say about this, we think about this. So the idea, the righteousness of the Pharisees, the idea of what is right or what is just is whatever you do to me, I'll do to you. And that's righteous. That's just. So if you slap me, I'll slap you back. And that's just because God said eye for eye, tooth for tooth, right? This is maybe the idea that Jesus is addressing. But remember, he said, if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven, your righteousness must be greater than that of the Pharisees. So if the idea was that someone slaps you, you slap them back, if that's righteous, because it would be unrighteous for someone to slap you and for you to shoot them, right? That would be a violation of this idea of eye for eye. That would be unjust. But if someone slaps you and you slap them back, that's eye for eye. That's righteous. But Jesus is saying, but I say to you, no. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. It's important for us to understand something. We think of a slapping somebody in the face as primarily an act of violence, as an act of aggression. And in the strict technical sense, it is. If you're striking somebody, that is an act of aggression. But in the mind of the first century Jew, in their culture, just like in our culture today, I don't think this has really changed. Slapping somebody in the face is not really an act of violence. It's really an insult. It's really a way to demean somebody. It's a way to humiliate somebody. It's similar, if you hit somebody in the head with a baseball bat, you're trying to kill them, right?
Or at least hurt them.
Yeah, you hit somebody in the head with a pipe or a bat or an axe handle or something, you're trying to kill that person. If you punch somebody in the face with a closed fist, you're trying to hurt them. You're trying to knock them out. But if you slap somebody in the face, you're not trying to kill them. You're not even necessarily trying to hurt them. You're trying to embarrass them. You're insulting them. That is an affront to somebody's dignity. And that is the way that the Jews understood slapping somebody in the face in Jesus' day. So it would be a mistake for us to look at this passage and think that this is, and understand being slapped in the face primarily as an act of violence. That would be a mistake. That's going to get us in the wrong direction. We need to think about this slap on the right cheek more of an insult than an act of violence. Does that make sense? And I point that out because this is a passage that it can be very difficult, and it has been used historically to support the idea of pacifism, which is, non-violent resistance ever in any circumstance. People say, well, Jesus taught you should not resist evil. If somebody does violence against you, you should just allow them to do violence against you. And this has led to all kinds of wacky applications of how that's things like, if somebody is like trying to kidnap your kids, you should just let them do it. Or if someone breaks into your home to assault you, you should just let them do it and not defend your family or not defend yourself. You should just allow these things to happen. And I think that it's a mistake to go in that direction. Because when Jesus says slap somebody in the face, that's not really an act of violence. That is more of an insult. That's like if somebody was to call you an ugly name. Notice Jesus doesn't say if somebody breaks into your house to rape your wife, you should give him your daughters also. He doesn't say that. If he wanted to say that, he could say that. He didn't say that. He didn't say if somebody puts a sword to your throat that you should, open up your chest for him as well. He's not saying that. He doesn't go to acts of violence. Okay? So it would be a mistake to take what Jesus is saying here and use that as an excuse to not defend and protect those who need defending and protecting, sometimes even by violent means. That's kind of a different story. We could get into that if we wanted to. I just wanted to point that out, that when we think about slapping on the right cheek, we need to think of that more as an insult than an act of violence. I don't think Jesus is intending to say if somebody is doing an act of violence against you that you just have to take it, or your family or anything else. I don't think that's what he's saying. Any questions or comments about that? So what he is saying then is if somebody insults you or embarrasses you, it's not up to you to insult them back or to embarrass them back or to slap them back. If somebody makes you the butt of your joke, it's not appropriate for us to turn around and repay the favor. What he says is that we should subject ourselves to even further humiliation. Someone slaps you on the cheek, we'll turn to them the other also. Somebody insults you, I don't know, but definitely don't insult them back. Prepare yourself to submit to even further humiliation. He says, do not retaliate. You have heard that it was said eye for eye, but I say to you, do not resist evil. If somebody embarrasses you or humiliates you, the response you should do is to subject yourself to even more of it. Not to take it into your own hands. Does that make sense? Turn to them the other also. Look at the next thing he says in verse 40. Will someone read verse 40?
Well, just to back up,
Go
I'm
ahead.
particularly, hinge on that word, evil. An evil person, not just a regular person, but an evil person. Someone that's got this malice in their heart to embarrass you or to put you down in any way that they can. So I kind of keep that in my mind because of the slapping thing. But 40 is...
Well, before you read that, what you said, it just reminded me of this little saying that maybe most of us have heard of. There's no point in wrestling with the pigs, because in the end, you both come out muddy, right? Don't resist an evil person. There's no point in wrestling around in the dirt with the pigs, because at the end, you're both just covered in mud. Take the high road, go above that kind of thing. And I think that might be a decent application. Go ahead and read verse 40 if you're...
If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also.
Okay, so here's another example. Jesus says, do not resist evil. Do not resist the evil person. And then he says, first of all, in regards to insults or an affront to your dignity, he says you shouldn't retaliate, but you should submit yourself to more. And now he's saying if somebody sues you to take away your cloak or your coat, you should also give him your cloak. You should give him even above and beyond what is being asked of you. And, you see this is, again, is in a legal context. Somebody is suing you, which there is a presumption of guilt here. There is an issue. There's a presumption that you have done something wrong, and that's why somebody is suing you. And it's as though Jesus is saying, look, your concern shouldn't be with getting even with this person. You shouldn't countersue for damages. He's saying, if you've done this, if you're being sued and brought to the court, you should be seeking to make peace. If they want your coat, give them your cloak also. Go above and beyond. Give more than what is being asked. Give more than what is expected to you, even as a sign or a symbol of good faith that you are seeking reconciliation. We read earlier about making amends with your enemy, making amends with your adversary quickly before you're delivered over to the judge, right? And we might see some of that's hearkening back in here also. It's as though Jesus is saying, if you're in this situation, if you've done someone wrong, or if you're just being sued or whatever, you should be willing to go above and beyond even what they're asking. Someone sues you and you're mad at them. The answer is not to sue them back. The answer is to do even more. Do even more. But go beyond what it is that they desire. Does that make sense? Any thoughts or comments about what he's saying here?
It's like being humble in yourself.
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when in that way you the other person, and you said that the other person can see really can see God in you.
Yeah.
Like when the Bible said in other words, that he said that we can put coals of fire at somebody, and it's nothing he's saying you want to hurt him that way.
Yeah.
But what it means is that you make the person to think
Right.
and see that you're a good person, you're humble, and you want to be that person.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And what that often does is it creates that sense of shame. Like if you've got someone who is being mean to you or is like extorting you or whatever, when you return their evil with kindness, when you return their cursings with blessing, it can produce a certain shame in that person to where they're like, oh man, now I feel bad because like here's this humble, meek person here, and I'm like being a total jerk, and they're just going above and beyond. So it can, and that's the idea of heaping coals of fire on someone's head, and you killing them with kindness or whatever, however you want to describe it. That is kind of the idea being portrayed here by Jesus. Just go above and beyond.
And the fact that the tunic and the cloak were very vital pieces of clothing for the person. So for them to give the tunic, what they would normally wear pretty much every day, but their cloak.
It's like their undergarments.
Yeah, the cloak was actually what they would spread over them to stay warm at night.
Yeah.
And so for them to say, well, here, you can have this too, it's a sacrificial type of act.
And, yes, and in fact, in the law of Moses, again, it talks about, if somebody owes you and you take them to court and like the judgment is there and they take all of your goods, all of your possessions, there was one thing that they weren't allowed to take, and that was your coat. They could take it as a pledge, but it had to be returned by sundown so that that person could use it as a blanket. And what Jesus is saying here, if someone sues you to take away even your coat, go above and beyond that. Give them the coat, but give them your tunic. Give them the clothes off of your back. Is this what it's going to take to make reconciliation? Is this what it's going to take to make things right? Is this what it's going to take to have peace? Then take it. I don't care about those things. I don't care about this. That is kind of the attitude that is being portrayed here. Not, well, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to get even. I'm going to get revenge. It's I'm going to get peace. That's kind of the idea that Jesus is presenting. Let's go ahead and read verse 41.
And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2.
Okay, so a little context here. In the Roman Empire, there was a rule, there was a law that any Roman soldier could compel any subject of the Roman Empire to carry their stuff. So imagine like you're walking to work one day and the cops pull you over and they like give you this, their flak jacket and their shotgun and all their stuff, and they say, I need you to take this down to the police station for me. And like you have to do it, right? That's kind of the way it was in the Roman Empire. Any soldier could grab any person and make them carry stuff, but they could only make them carry it for 1 mile. And there were mile markers on all of the main Roman roads. This is a mile, this is a mile. And so the law was you could compel any subject of the Roman Empire to carry your stuff or to carry a package or whatever it was through the postal system that existed, but only for 1 mile. And Jesus is saying here, if somebody compels you to go with them 1 mile, he's talking about now the Roman occupation. He's talking to the Jews about their oppressors and how they are oppressing them, right? He says, if somebody compels you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Don't get angry and bitter and harbor this hatred in your heart and think about, how am I going to get revenge? What am I going to do? No, they ask you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. And my wife and I watched this TV show called The Chosen. I really enjoy it. A lot of people poo-poo on it, but a lot of people poo-poo on all kinds of things. And in The Chosen, there is this scene where Jesus is walking with his disciples. and they are conscripted by the military to carry all of their stuff. And so Jesus, and all the apostles, they're all mad, they're all angry about this. But Jesus takes all the stuff and he begins marching. And so they all march and they get to the mile marker and everybody stops to take off the stuff, but not Jesus. Jesus kept going. And they were like, what are you doing? Even the Roman soldiers were like, stop, what are you doing? You can't do this. And Jesus said, you're not making me do it, I want to do it. I'm doing this voluntarily. And he told all the disciples, pick the stuff up, let's go. And obviously this is extra biblical. We don't read about this in the scripture at all. It's just illustrating Jesus' teaching here in the show. And what you see as that's happening, as the disciples put all the stuff on and as Jesus is marching, you see the look of shame come on the soldiers' faces. And then what you see is they start taking their stuff off of the Jews. They start taking their packs back. Their leader says, no, get your bag, get your staff, get your helmet. And he's making the soldiers now carry their own stuff. But instead of Jesus and the disciples responding with anger and bitterness and vindictiveness, they responded with meekness. They responded with humility. They responded as going above and beyond, and that was heaping coals of fire on the head of those people. And I really just liked how the show illustrated how that works and how that would have even played out in Jesus' day, how relevant of a command that really is. If somebody compels you to go with them 1 mile, go ahead and go with them for 2. Go beyond what is required of you. Any questions or comments about that? Let's go ahead and read the last verse here, verse 42.
Give to him who asks you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away.
Okay, so this is another interesting passage. This is a very difficult passage. I'll just say I've spent more time studying and thinking about this particular passage than I even do for most other ones, because look at what he says. Give to him that asks of you. Well, what does that mean? Just like do not resist the evil one. What does that mean? What do you mean, Jesus, give to him who asks of you? Am I supposed to just give until I have absolutely nothing left simply because somebody is asking me? He says, do not resist the one who wants to borrow. If someone will borrow, don't turn them away. What am I supposed to do? Give my life savings, give my retirement to this bum on the street who is just asking me and asking me and asking me? And I'm not sure that is the right way of understanding it. I'm not sure that we should understand it that way. In fact, let's turn to Luke chapter 6. Because Luke chapter 6, I think, is going to help us understand maybe a little bit better what Jesus' intentions are when he says what he's saying here. What does it mean, give to the one who asks you? I mean, how far are we supposed to take that? And I think Luke 6 is going to help us understand. So will somebody please read Luke chapter 6, verses 29 and 30?
If someone slaps you on one cheek, turn to them the other also. If someone takes your coat, do not withhold your shirt from them. Give to everyone who asks you, and if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not demand it back. Okay,
so we see kind of a repetition here. This is a parallel passage in our Synoptics. This is a section in Luke where Jesus is offering the same teaching he's offering in Matthew. We see smiting on the cheek, turn the other, taking the cloak, give him your coat also. And then we see it again here in verse 30. Give to everybody that asks you. Well, this has not really opened anything up for us. It's still just saying the same thing. The next clause, I think, helps a little bit. Anyone who takes away your goods, do not ask them back again. I think that's a clue as to what Jesus is talking about. But there's more. Let's read verse 34 and 35 as well.
And if you lend to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to be repaid in full. but love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting to get anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High, because He is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful.
Very good. That, I think, really helps us, especially what he says here in verse 35. Lend, he says, not hoping for anything in return. Give to those who ask you. Do not refuse to lend to those who seek to borrow, and do so without expecting anything in return. Remember, the whole context of this is eye for eye, this for that. We shouldn't give expecting return in the this for that model, but we should give liberally. This is an exhortation. This is Jesus telling us to be liberal. And I'm not talking about politically liberal. I'm talking about liberal in the giving and taking of finance. We should be generous in the way that we give. We should give generously, not expecting anything in return. In another context, we could think of it, if you think about the tax collecting system in Jesus' time, the tax collectors would come and they had a quota from the Roman government, but they would demand even more above and beyond that quota. So the Roman government says, you owe me 10 shekels for a tax, but the tax collector says you owe 20 shekels for the tax. What's Jesus saying? Give to them. If they're asking you for the 20 shekels, give them the 20 shekels, and don't expect that you're ever going to get it back. Do not resist the evil one. Do not resist that person who is whatever. And with the taxes especially, you didn't have a choice. That's not a free trade situation. You had to pay. And so, if you didn't pay, it's going to create all kinds of issues. It's going to disrupt the peace in your life. It's not like you go down to the supermarket and they're like, oh, for you, that fish is $5,000. Okay, I'm just going to go buy fish from this stand over here. That's not what he's saying. But the idea here, Jesus is just telling us we need to be generous. We need to give liberally. We need to be liberal with our finances, not prodigal, not reckless, not foolish, but we should give liberally. We should lend to those who ask us without usury, without interest, not expecting anything in return. That is kind of Jesus' ethic as far as that goes. Very briefly, I want to tell a story where I failed in this area. So one time, it was late at night, and I was going to get my wife and I some Whataburger in Carthage. And I needed to stop and get some gas because I was totally out of gas. So I go down to the gas station, and it's midnight. And I get some gas, and at the gas station is this transient fellow. And he says, hey, can you give me a ride over here? Because my car broke down and ran out of gas, and my old lady's waiting for me, and you can help me? So I said, okay, get the guy some gas, take him to where his car is. And remember what I'm doing. I'm on my way to go get some fast food for me and my wife. This is not life or death situation here. And when I get there, dude asks me, he says, you think we can have some money so we can get some food? And in my mind, I'm thinking this ungrateful jerk. I just got this dude gas. I just brought this dude. It's the middle of the night. I brought him to this place. And I'm on my way. I'm doing stuff. I'm trying to get there in the back, buddy. You can go right through there and there to the right.
I just went to practice.
Very cool. It's good to see you. I'm glad you came here after practice.
Yeah, I tried to.
Very cool. So anyway, I tell the guy no, I really can't. I can't do that. I brought you here. That's it. I gotta go. And so I'm driving now, and I'm pulling into the the Whataburger, and all I can hear in my mind is these words of Jesus: give to the one who asks you. If somebody asks you and you have it, just to give it to them. Don't wait until tomorrow. If you have it today, just give them today. So I'm just being smitten and convicted, right? Because I turned this guy down. I said no. And so anyway, I ended up getting some food, and I went back to where they were to bring them the food because I just felt so bad. But they weren't there, and I missed that opportunity. But the Lord really taught me something in that. The Lord often teaches me more in my failures than He does in my successes, you see. I really learned in that experience what obedience to this looks like. And in that context, I had it to give. There was no reason I couldn't have done it. I just said no because I was being selfish and arrogant and proud. And the Lord convicted me of it. And, I missed that opportunity. But now, every time I have an opportunity like that, I remember the pain of that missed opportunity. I remember the pain of that level of disobedience. And I don't want to experience it again. And so God has used even my disobedience and my sin for good in my life because I allowed myself to be disciplined and corrected by his goodness. Does that make sense? So what does it mean when he says, do not resist the evil one? If you be insulted, accept even more humiliation. Don't resist, don't answer back to the person who insults you. Just accept even more humiliation. Submit yourself. If you are being legally extorted, offer up even more. They want to take your coat, give them the clothes off your back, give them the bed that you sleep on, if that's what it takes to make peace. If you're being compelled into servitude, go beyond the expectations. And in the ancient world, it wasn't uncommon to be conquered and sold as a slave. That happens to people. That's happened to Christians throughout history. And Jesus says, if you be compelled into servitude, do not seek revenge, but just go above and beyond what it is that is expected of you. If generosity is asked of you, give without the expectation of return. What does it mean to resist the evil person? It means to not take vengeance into your own hands. It means not to respond in kind, but to respond as we saw earlier in Matthew chapter 5 with those Christian virtues, the virtue of meekness, the virtue of being a peacemaker, the virtue of poverty of spirit, the virtue of rejoicing when you are persecuted and when people say all kinds of evil against you. These virtues we are supposed to be developing and practicing, and this is how we can practice them in these situations. When we're insulted, we respond not with anger, but with meekness. When we're compelled into servitude, we respond not with violence, but with a peacemaker spirit. When we are being sued, we respond with a peacemaker spirit. And when something is asked of us, we respond with generosity, with liberality. Any questions or comments about what it means to resist evil? Do you agree with what I've said? Do you disagree? Do you have a different conclusion? What are your thoughts about what we've talked about?
Well, that also can happen not only with, because we're talking anybody, right? Whether people in the streets, also can be in family.
Yes.
Also can be in family. Also can be wife and husband.
Yeah.
Brother and brother. And what I do is that we don't fight. We don't argue.
Intense fellowship. That's what we call
We
it.
have disagreements, right?
Yeah.
Which is a little different. And so, we know woman, right?
We do. We do.
And the more they blah blah blah, the more angry you get, more. And so what I do is, I just walk out. I walk out of the house and I go to the yard. Start doing something. And a lot of times she's telling me, fight back to me. Yeah, she said, fight back to me. And I said,
I have gotten aggravated because Charlie won't argue.
I would not do it.
Yeah, they used to aggravate me terribly. It doesn't anymore. If we disagree, he just doesn't say anything,
5 minutes later, she's calling me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
And that's the thing. That's another thing. I'm really glad you bring that up because that's another thing about this. When we think about, I started at the beginning talking about this idea of blood feuds, and how eye for eye leaves the whole world blind, Gandhi said. And there is actually an element of truth to that. If we respond in our relationships, tit for tat, eye for eye, what we're doing is just continuing the cycle. And what Jesus is telling us is, no, you have to break the cycle. You have to break the cycle of violence. You have to break the cycle of aggression. You have to break the cycle of argument. And if you feed into it, if you respond with it and you feed into it, it just goes further down the ditch. But what separating yourself does is it cuts the cycle off. It can't breathe anymore. It's like covering a lamp with a bowl or something. It cannot breathe and it will just die out. Jesus, that's part of what it is to be a peacemaker, is to diffuse the situation, not to just respond evil with evil and keep it going. Eventually the cycle has to get broken. Same thing with the blood feud. Eventually somebody's going to have to stop killing the other person, or it's just going to continue forever.
It's better to pour water on the fire than put more wood in it.
Very true. Very true. Well, let's look at Romans chapter 12. We got just a few minutes left here this evening. I want to make application. And I've got two passages I would like us to look at. We might not even need a lot of commentary because it explains itself. Let's look first of all at Romans chapter 12.
Well, I just wanted to say, going through that and saying what, the meek. And then I said, well, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
Yep.
Because they're doing everything that they can to maintain not just outwardly peace, but peace inside themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and in doing so, you grow closer to Jesus.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're looking at Romans 12, beginning in verse 17. Romans 12, we're going to begin in verse 17. This is our application. How do we live out this teaching that Jesus has said? How do we live this out? Because, I haven't been slapped in the face in a really long time. I've only ever been slapped in the face a couple of times my whole life. And that's not very common. I've never been compelled into servitude. Nobody's ever sued me. I take that back. But anyway, generally speaking, these are not situations that we find ourselves in quite often. But I think that we still can look here and make some good application. Will somebody read verses 17 through 21 of Romans chapter 12?
Repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not avenge yourselves, but rather give place to wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him drink. For in doing so, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
Very good. So we see some very practical application of, and that sounds a lot like the stuff that Jesus is teaching right now, does it not? I can't help but feel like the Apostle Paul is hearkening back to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. This text would have been available to him. The Gospel of Luke would have been available to Paul at the time that he was writing. And I can't help but feel like this is what he's thinking of, even as he's writing this. First of all, he says, repay no man evil for evil. If you're insulted, do not insult them back. If whatever the case may be, do not repay evil for evil. He says right here, I think it's very important, as much as it is possible, as much as it depends on you, live at peace with all people. Whatever you can do to have peace, that's that virtue of being a peacemaker we saw a number of weeks ago in the Beatitudes. As much as it's not always possible, but you do everything you can do to live at peace with everybody around you. That's a good one. He says also, do not avenge yourself. That's really the heart of this whole message. We do not take vengeance into our own hands, but leave place for wrath. For as it is written, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay. And here's good news for you. God can get your enemies back 1,000,000 times better than you can. Rest assured, God can deal with your enemies way better than you can. Give place to wrath. Let God deal with it. What is our job? How are we supposed to deal with our enemies? We're supposed to love them. And if you were to back up and read verse 14, it echoes Jesus again. Bless those who persecute you. If your enemy is hungry, give him something to eat. If your enemy needs their water turned on, turn their water on. If your enemy needs something, provide that. And in so doing, he says, you heap coals of fire on his head, what we talked about earlier. He sums this all up by saying, do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. That is the heart of what Jesus is teaching here. The heart of what Jesus is teaching is do not be overcome with evil. Do not resist the evil, Jesus says, but overcome that evil with good, with the virtues of meekness and peacemaking particularly. Those are the two really big ones. Those things are incredibly important. I'm going to read, just because we only have a couple minutes left, I'm just going to read this last passage in 1 Peter. And I'll kind of make a very brief comment, and we'll kind of wrap up here. This last passage in 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 9 through 18 says this, do not render evil for evil, railing for railing, but contrariwise as a blessing. So do not render evil for evil, but render blessing for evil. Do not render railing for railing, but render blessing for railing. Knowing that this is what you are called to, that you should inherit a blessing. For he that will love life and see good days, let him refrain his tongue from evil. We must keep guard of our mouth and his lips, that they speak no guile. Let him eschew evil. Stay away from evil. Treat evil like a dirty thing. And do good. Let him seek peace and ensue it. Again, this idea of as much as it depends on you, live at peace with all people. We should be seeking peace, not speaking evil, returning blessing for cursing. He goes on, for the eyes of the Lord are over the righteous. His ears are open to their prayers, but the face of the Lord is against them that do evil. Again, give place to wrath. Give place for God to do his judgment. He can do a better job than you can do. Our job is to love our enemies and to bless our enemies. Let God deal with the vengeance. Let God deal with the justice. We can just do what we're supposed to do. Verse 13, and who is the one that will harm you if you are followers of that which is good? If you are doing good, most of the time people are going to leave you alone. You're not going to oftentimes be in situations where people are going to be trying to harm you. But, he says in verse 14, if you suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are happy, you are blessed. Do not be afraid of their terror. Do not be troubled. So, if we live godly lives, for the most part, people are just going to leave us alone. But if we do suffer living a godly life, then we are blessed. Blessed are you when you are reviled and persecuted and people say all kinds of evil things against you falsely for my name's sake. Remember. He goes on, he says, but sanctify the Lord God in your hearts. That means set the Lord apart as holy in your heart. Determine within yourself who God is to you. And be ready always to give an answer to every man that asks for the reason of the hope that is within you with meekness and fear. You know, when you are mistreated and abused and you wear that gracefully, people are going to notice that. And they're going to say, how can you deal with that? Why is it that you can put up with that? Why is it that you don't retaliate? Why is it that you're not full of bitterness and anger and resentment? He's saying, be ready to give an answer. And what is the answer? The answer, of course, is because the Lord Jesus Christ has forgiven me and cleansed me and has called me to live this style of life. We sanctify God in our heart, and then we are ready to give an answer to everyone who asks us what the reason for the hope that is within us. 16, having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you as evildoers, that they may be ashamed who falsely accuse your good behavior in Jesus Christ. For it is better, if it is the will of God, for you to suffer for doing good than to suffer for doing evil. For Christ also has once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh and being made alive by the Spirit. So how do we apply this? How do we live this? There's three main things. Do not repay evil for evil. As much as it is possible, live at peace with all men, and love your enemies. Give place for God's judgment. Our job is to love our enemies, not to seek vengeance. Let God do the vengeance. He's better at it than us anyway. So that's all I've got. Are there any further questions, comments, thoughts as we come to a close here this evening? Has this been good?
Well, and I've run across this in my lifetime, some people who would only call you when they need something. And then after you asking and asking and asking, and you supplying, you begin to feel taken advantage of. And so I don't know if there is a line there or not. Only if you seek the Lord and He tells you, do this or do that, whatever is in your heart. So that I have run across multiple times. And so it's a difficult time when that happens. Because I'm not really sure sometimes what to do. Because if you're giving it to see it come back to you, then you're not going to, it will make you more unhappy.
Yeah.
Because it'll never come back to you. So
Yeah.
you gotta give it, like you said, without expectation.
Yes. And that will prevent bitterness and resentment from developing, which is important. But I think you raise a good point. And we talked about this when we were studying 1 John, because he talks about the way that we demonstrate our love is by meeting people's needs. And if somebody asks of you and we're able to do it, generally speaking, we should meet that need. But when we think of the law of love, sometimes to truly love somebody, we have to say no. Because when we talk about virtue is found kind of in the middle, right? And there is a way to love that is inappropriate, that is actually enablement. And in the excess of that kind of giving love would be enablement. And that's not righteous. That's actually a vice. That's a problem. You're not actually loving somebody if you're enabling them to continue to make poor decisions and put themselves in poor circumstances. Sometimes the best way to love somebody is to say no. But that requires great prudence, and that's a case-by-case basis, and it can be extremely difficult. It is very difficult to discern where that line is. That is a very difficult position. Any other questions or comments? Well, I hope you all enjoyed this Bible study. I enjoyed it. I hope that this made this passage come to life in you. I hope it challenged you as much as it challenged me. And I pray that the Lord would make this stick for us. So, Brother Martin, would you mind closing us with prayer this evening?